Frater Crow is an ordained occult minister, paranormalist, radio host, bone collector, and Diabolist. He is the host of the Knights of Nephilim, P.O.N.G, or Pair of Normal Guys, and Uncovering the Underground. You can listen to his podcasts on Spreaker or your favorite streaming platform. He has a very interesting Instagram called Darkness and Divination. Also, check out his Facebook page. I'm excited to have him as a guest. Please welcome my special guest tonight, Frater Crow. Frater, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Brother Nock, thank you so much for having me. As I said to you a little bit ago, it's kind of like the tables turn for us, where this time you're interviewing me, and I appreciate you having me on.
I've been excited about this. I really have. I've been on your show a couple of times, but you know, people are interested in you and, you know, what you're like and what you think and what your path is. So this is going to be great. Thank you for being here again.
Absolutely.
First of all, you have a lot of podcasts, which I've emphasized in the intro of this video tonight. What is your inspiration for starting all of these podcasts?
I think for me, it was a way of getting out entertainment that I felt needed to get out, but done in a way that was very true to me that I don't think anybody else was doing. So when I started out, the first podcast that I created was called Uncovering the Underground. And that was one that interviews people from music to modeling, stars of the big screen, comedy, oddities, and everything in between. So it was a way of getting all these different underground personalities on the show and interviewing them, which you would hear other shows do. But a lot of times I felt it was very stale. I would feel that the person interviewing them didn't know much about their music or anything of the following. So it was missing that connectivity. And I felt like that was something I could bring. So I ran that show for several years, have roughly about 100 episodes of that show. And I retired that since then. But during that time of running that show, I decided, okay, well, there's a couple other things now that I got the feel of podcasting and I've gotten good at this. I want to launch a show called Pair of Normal Guys. It's a paranormal show talking about supernatural and paranormal phenomena. And that was our second show that we launched. It's me and my friend Daniel James. Both of us kind of do different things. I've been heavily into the paranormal world for a very long time. He's into the cryptid and alien side. And we talk over all kinds of different topics and discussions, have, professionals within the field come on. And it kept sitting in the back of my mind that I really wanted to do a show on occultism and esoteric sciences and mysticism. But I was kind of iffy on doing it at first. Do I really want to put myself out there in this group as far as esotericism? Is it the right time? How is it going to be perceived? And if I'm going to do it, I need to do it the right way. And I sat with that for a little while and decided, no, I need to, because I didn't feel there was a lot of other shows out there doing what I was doing at the time. And I didn't feel there was many others that could do it like I would do it. So I just end up kind of balls up and went in. And the first season was a very big learning experience for me. But then season 2, 3, and then now season 4 have just flowed very nicely. I've had amazing guests across all different walks of life and belief systems and practices. Obviously, as we said, you've been on it a couple of times. And to be honest with you, that's my favorite show. I love talking esotericism and occultism. I do love paranormal guys. I do love uncovering the underground, but that's my bread and butter is Knights of the Nephilim.
Nice. Yeah, it's great. It's one of my favorite podcasts.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
So how long have you been on the left-hand path?
Oh my. So that it's been a wild and crazy journey. Started out at 14. So I've been I should tell the listeners out there, I've been involved in spiritualism in some type of form or another since I was 5. been involved with occultism since I was 14. Now, when I say that, I had my first encounter with a full body apparition at 5 years old, which really at that time, I had no idea of ghosts or anything like that. It completely changed my perspective of reality and life, which I think was the opening of the door to change everything to come. And, I had asked questions. I grew up, unfortunately, had to, go to Catholic school. My parents had three children. I was the youngest of the three. And they wanted me to be more well-behaved than my two older brothers. So they decided to send me to Catholic school, and I ended up being the worst of the three. And, go figure. And I, started seeing ghosts and things at 5 years old, and it left a lot of questions. And I know that when I was in like first and second grade, I had a lot of questions on spirits and ghosts and other realms. And I was told that none of this was actually happening. It was my imagination, or stuff that we don't talk about, or, the common, it's the devil or it's evil. You don't communicate with these things. And that didn't sit right with me. So that really caused a rift too. So seeing spirits for the first time changed my perception. Having these figures that I should have looked up to telling me I was wrong and not to talk about it changed my understanding and belief structure. And in my early age, probably, I think 12, 13 years old, in my local library, in the back of the library was all these old books that no one really even went and looked at anymore. Well, I used to go to the library all the time. I love to read. I still do to this day. I'm a voracious reader. And I went back there and found this old, strange bound book, just a black cover, said nothing on the binding or the cover. But when I flipped it open, it was a book on witchcraft. And it went over everything from incantations and spells to the witch trials and pictures of torture. And I read it, and it awakened some type of primal dark lust inside of me that I can't really explain. When I seen these pictures and read this information, I felt like I had awakened something inside of me that always had been there, not only in this life, but prior. And everything changed from that point. I really got drawn to that. And next thing I know, strangely enough, in the mail one day at the age of 14, we used to get those mailers that you could order like 5 books for $5. It's almost like the CD catalogs you used to get. And first, I never really looked at them. I would go down to the library. I didn't buy books. I didn't really have much money. I'd only mow lawns from time to time and things. And something kept telling me, pick it up, pick it up. Well, I picked it up, started looking through it, and 2 books jumped out at me. Never had heard of this gentleman, never had heard really much about him or anything that, in that genre. But I come across Anton LaVey and the Satanic Bible and Satanic Rituals, and something spoke to me. And, one thing I'll say about my family is, even though my parents had chose to send me to Catholic school, they were always very, very cool parents and always very supportive in anything I would do. And I asked my mother, hey, I have my money saved up from mowing. I want to order these 2 books. Will you order them for me? And she obviously seen what they were and kind of looked at me like, you want these books? And I says, yes, Mom, I want to get these books. I just feel really drawn to it. She didn't say anything else. She ordered them for me. And reading the Satanic Bible for the first time, I felt as kind of a misfit kid that someone understood me. And it just felt like someone else had this theory, this idea of life and this way of looking at things that is similar to how I felt, but more progressed, obviously, and more adult. And I loved it and just started feeding into it. And at the age of 15, I performed my first ritual, which worked very potently and very efficiently. And it was a mixture of the La Messe Nor Black Mass mixed with a blind invocation or evocation of a spirit that I found in that old witchcraft book. So me and a couple buddies went to a graveyard one night that was very, very known for being active. It's one of the most haunted places in Pennsylvania. And in the middle of the night, we decided to do this La Messe Nor Black Mass mixed with blind evocation. And as young and as inexperienced as we were, sure enough, something came through, and it actually ended up possessing my best friend. And he had disappeared for a while. We didn't know where the hell he was. Me and the other gentleman were looking around. Where did he go? Where did he go? Couldn't find him. Well, then we find him in the back seat of the 2-seater car, or the 2-door car. crunched in there, and we're looking at him, talking to me, wasn't answering. And then when he did look up at us, he started displaying heavy signs of possession, and we were able to get this thing to leave him. And then we walked around for a little while. And one of the craziest events that's ever happened in my entire life is as we were walking around this graveyard in the woods in front of us, and it was probably about 2 a.m, we heard what sounded like a pterodactyl / monstrous screeching scream. And it started in the woods in front of us. And instead of it being like it was running around us in a circle, it was like every second it was a foot further along the circle, but it never stopped from where it began. And it went the whole way around back to the beginning, got louder, and dropped to silence. I've never since heard anything like this in my life. And I've had a lot of experience working with demons and daemons. This was very unique. I don't know what the hell we did that night, Alistair, but it worked. It worked very efficiently. The 2 guys with me were terrified, actually almost to the point of crying. And they wanted to get out of there, and we left. Well, years later, I returned to that same spot with a group of people to spook them a little bit. And one of the girls, within being there for 15 minutes, became possessed. Almost the exact same thing happened. So at that point, I loved what I was doing and realizing how real this was, but I knew that I needed to have more of an understanding, because you have to understand at this point, I had no idea of Goetian magic or Solomonic magic. I didn't have any idea of ceremonial or the Western mystery tradition. I just knew I was a strange kid who liked dark stuff, and I found Satanism. And it worked. But I'm like, you know what? Working isn't always a good thing if you don't know how to work it properly. So I took the next 10, 12 years studying every book I could, reading every ritual, every pamphlet, every manuscript that I could find from, not only left-hand path, but left-hand path, right-hand path, Hindu, everything, anything I could get my hands on, I read and studied to gain more wisdom and understanding, but to also perfect my practice. And it's been a long road.
Wow. I tell you, that's a lot of times. And it was the same with me when I first experienced a spirit. I was taken aback the same way. It was like, wow, what is this? And I was afraid at first, but then I leaned in to it. Yes. And I think that's what separates the dabbler from the true seeker, is being able to lean into it and say, this is frightening, it's unsettling, but I also know there's a connection there. And I think that's very interesting.
It is. I mean, even when that sound happened in the woods, as soon as it happened, within seconds, both my buddies were literally hysterical and they wanted to leave. I was the opposite. I says, we need to go into the woods and figure out what it is that made it. And they're looking at me and they're like, you're crazy, man. You're absolutely out of your mind. and it just drew me in. It, even though it was terrifying, I was scared. I definitely had some hesitancy, like whatever I heard could probably kill the 3 of us. At the same time, so be it. And I was like, I want to go and find out and interact with whatever this is. I called it here. It came. Why did it come? If it came, it wants to meet me. I want to meet it. And I unfortunately didn't get to that night. Maybe it's a good thing, but it was definitely an experience that changed my life. Just like you said, the first time I had that full body apparition at 5, I mean, once I seen it, I knew I was seeing it. There was no doubt in my mind that, oh, my mind's playing tricks on me, or no, I seen it and said, oh, wow. And it instantly drew me in that this is here. I'm a little scared, but I want to know why and how and where. And I want to be able to communicate with these things. And throughout my childhood growing up, I communicated quite often with the spirits of the dead, which really I think has been a progenitor for my practices, nowadays.
Looking at it from a spiritual point of view, how important is ritual in your practice now?
You have a lot of people who are very knowledgeable in the mysticism side and the esoteric side, and they know a lot, and they're armchair magicians, and they don't do ritual. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. They're very smart and they're very academic. And you have a lot of people that are very profound in ritual, but they don't necessarily know a lot of the academic side. And I think each side is missing a piece. I've always prided myself on both. So I would tell you that ritual is absolutely important. It's beyond words can describe, but it also needs to be teamed up with constant research and constant evaluation of yourself, because you have experiences in ritual that sometimes you can't fully comprehend without digging deeper, reading deeper. And sometimes it'll be 3 months later that that book that you're reading or that research you're doing will spark what happened 3 months earlier in ritual. And if you wouldn't have read that, you would have never connected those dots to really bring it home and say, oh, wow. So I find that both parts are important, but I'm certainly a practitioner and a ritualist. I couldn't imagine only reading, which I do love. My home, when I feel truly at home, is just like the slogan of my show Nights of the Nephilim, is when I step into the circle. When I'm doing evocation or invocation and conjuring spirits, and when I'm communicating, that is my home. That's when I feel the most comfortable.
So I noticed your chart and I love it back there. The mushrooms. And we were talking before the show about, the use of those. Tell us a little bit about what your theory is on that, and then what your result is.
So, I've always been a syncretist. I've always, just like I said, researched everything I could and read everything I could, because I don't feel that there's any one specific practice that ever fit me except my own. And my own is made up of, pieces of many different practices that came together to syncretize my own. So from witchcraft to ceremonial magic to Satanism and Luciferianism to Gnosticism and so forth. But one of the pieces that I certainly picked up is the old school witchcraft, and with that, the use of baneful plants, what a lot of people call the poison path. I find it's a path that a lot shouldn't walk on, but I find that it is a path that is extremely potent. So the use of entheogens, whether that be psilocybin mushrooms or whether that be belladonna or henbane or mandrake root, or like behind me, there's the entire family of the flyagaric Amanita muscaria toadstools or mushrooms. They can evoke certain responses within the practitioner's mind and take them to different astral levels and different levels of consciousness and understanding that you can't normally reach without them. So certainly during ritual, through deep transhypnagogic states and through self-hypnosis, you can reach very high levels of consciousness and also astral project. And that's profound, but the use of the entheogens can take you to a very different place. And that's why you have to be careful, because ritual itself, especially dealing with darker forces, demonic and demonic forces, can cause people to go insane. It happens all the time. They start to lose their mind. You add that element in, and you have a lot of people that'll lose their mind. Either one of them by themselves can cause you to go nuts, but I find it to be very, very beneficial. So, I mean, we all know the stories. And for listeners out there that don't know this might be, like a whoa moment, but we have all seen the folklore of witches riding their brooms at night to the Sabbath to have orgies and dance with the devil. Well, most people don't realize that the reason that the witches are shown riding brooms is the fact of using things like fly agaric toadstools or what they called flying ointments. They would rub broomsticks with these baneful hallucinogenic ointments, and then they would insert it inside them, and they would truly ride their broom. And as it soaked in the vaginal cavity of the membrane, it would cause for hallucinations, and they would drift off into a hallucinatory state and have orgies with the devil on the Sabbath. And, this has been something that's been practiced for thousands of years. And, not only in witchcraft, but in multiple cultures, from, African diasporic traditions to indigenous people and everything in between. The plant allies have always been something that's kind of a bedrock. Now, you have a lot of people nowadays that'll say, oh, you never mix that in with ritual. And I agree that most people shouldn't. But one has to decide for themselves, is it a part of your practice or isn't it? It's not like you're doing it every night, every ritual, but from time to time, it can take you to levels much, much deeper.
That is interesting. I did not know that about the witches riding the broom, so to
That's where
speak.
the iconography came from. Yep. So they originally, that's how that started, is they would actually truly ride their broom because it was something that they could use as a tool that was the right shape that everybody had. And they would make these concoctions out of different, plants that are readily available, like datura, for example. Datura is a plant that pretty much grows everywhere. And it is extremely hallucinogenic. And it would be easy to make a concoction or a flying ointment out of it. And then in the comfort of their own home could rub it on their broom, ride their broom, and then drift off to astral land and have orgies with the devil. Now, why I say it's not for everybody, and where I would please express to anybody listening, I am not promoting or suggesting any of you use this. I think that we need to do that as a disclaimer for both you and I right now. We are not suggesting to do this.
Right,
And if
right.
you choose to, you are a grown up and you do it on your own. But you also have to be very careful because there's things like datura. Datura is very, very toxic and potent. And there's a very, very small fine line between being out of your mind, hallucinating, to dead. It's a very thin line. One small mistake and you're gone. And it is truly, they call it, the thorn apple or the devil's apple. And there's a reason for that. It is the one plant that I would say out of all plants is a plant of hell. And the reason I say that, you can have good trips and bad trips, or good experiences and bad experiences on any of these type of entheogens. This specific entheogen, for some reason only, creates chaos. And when I say chaos, I mean seeing people bleeding out of their eyes and ears. They're not, you're just seeing it, but bleeding out of their eyes and ears, literally seeing people morph into devils and demons, seeing flames all around you, seeing Holocaust where you're looking and everywhere's being bombed and there's mushroom clouds and fire clouds in the sky, and everything you experience is apocalyptic and demonic. No one can explain why that is, but this plant specifically in human beings causes pandemonium. And that could cause someone easily to snap. But experiencing that also in a ritual sense can be very life-changing. But it can also be terror for a lot of people, because the one thing about this plant that's very, very unique is once you take it, it somehow has a mechanism built within it that erases from your memory that you took it. Can't explain that. But you'll take it, and 45 minutes later, you're having this all happen, but you don't know why. You literally don't remember taking it. You don't remember anything about it. It erases itself from your mind. And all you know is that the gates of hell opened up and you were seeing demons and fire and chaos. And it doesn't last necessarily 3 hours or 4 hours or 12 hours. It can last 7, 8 days. So it's something that, like I said, folks, if you're listening out there, the poison path can be something that can be powerful for you, but it has to be done in the utmost care. And if you don't think you can handle it, or you have any type of mental disability, please don't, because it could be very catastrophic for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I caution people when they dabble with demons.
Yes.
The same thing can happen. They can absolutely drive themselves crazy. They get the wrong entity and they think they control that entity, and, they're going to turn it into a circus animal, and it just absolutely takes over their mind. So
thing is, like you said too, yeah, I mean, and a lot of people think, okay, well, I did dabble and I don't know if I handled it properly, but it's been a week and nothing went wrong, I'm good. Well, that time frame doesn't work exactly, because things on the astral and spiritual plane have a whole different time frame than here on the physical manifest world. So it can be 2 years later and shit just start to go really, really wrong for you, and you don't know why. Well, it's because of the mistake you made 2 years earlier. So you have to, and for people just getting into this out there, I mean, I know it's hard to say, well, you know what? I don't know if I fully want to invest into this, but I am curious. There almost is that point where before you jump in, you have to say to yourself, if I jump in, I'm doing this for life. or I'm just going to be curious, but I'm going to stay away and not jump in. And a lot of people don't know that. They're like, well, I'm going to dabble. We'll see what happens and I'll decide from there. Well, that's a problem because it's almost like working in an electrical box and not knowing anything about electric. I'm just going to stick my finger and see what happens. Okay, you might be fine or you might be dead. So, you have to be very, very careful for, like I said, for neophytes out there. This isn't a game. I mean, this is real. Spiritual energies and currents and the entities that we work with are very, very real. Whether you want to consider them as external from you, solely external, or you want to consider them all just parts of our psychological makeup and part of our psyche, or you consider them a mixture of both, it doesn't matter. Whether it's coming from you or it's coming outside of you, either way, it can have catastrophic effects on you.
Absolutely. Well said. So where are you located at?
So I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So been here my whole life, grew up in this area, still here, 35 years later. So it's been a good ride. I've visited a lot of other states. I've been out of the country a few different times, love a lot of other places, but only has ever been one other place that I said I would call home, which is Colorado. I just think it's an absolutely gorgeous state. But Pennsylvania is my home. It's I couldn't imagine being anywhere else, honestly.
So how's the occult community there?
There is some. It's actually kind of quiet. There's a few different well-known people. Sarah Mastros, who's been a guest on the show, she's an author, a teacher, and does a lot with the occult. She's here in Pittsburgh. There's some other people that are writers and things that you'll see pop up from time to time, and some different functions and things, but not a whole lot, to be honest with you. My friend Natasha Sarver, who owns a little shop of Lilith, who is my creative director for my shows, and we do a lot of different projects together. She runs a witchcraft shop, and she has really helped bring a lot of occultism here. So what she's doing is not only does she have a shop for witchcraft and opening that up for people, but she does public group rituals. She has speakers and teachers come and teach on different subjects. I've been there a couple times. First time I taught on goetic magic. Second one was on the do's and don'ts of paranormal research. And then eventually I'm going to do a four-part, I think four, I haven't decided yet, a four-part course on Kabbalism, which will cover everything from the basics of creation of reality and the Sephiroth to the Klipothic worlds and all of that. So it'll be very, very dense and deep. But she's bringing that to the public, which never was really around here. There's several other witchcraft shops around Pennsylvania, but they're all really gemstones and incense. And the same thing you see, they're metaphysical shops, and I'm not knocking that, but they'll call themselves witches, and their education on witchcraft is that, I light sage from time to time and I have gemstones in my building. So they're not real witches. She's a real witch. So, there's a big difference there. But it's quiet, but it's growing. And I'm someone that will pop in from time to time, do those teachings, be a part of things, but then disappear back into the shadows. I like to kind of keep to myself.
I hear you. Absolutely. And I'll put the links to all of your social media, but especially your Facebook page, because you have links to other folks, other shops and things, and people can check that out. I believe that you're involved in paranormal, as you said, investigations and research. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, kind of piggybacking off of the story earlier, it stuck with me from day one when I had my first spiritual encounter. And, once again, I didn't know a lot about ghosts at the time. I just kind of happened. Same thing with I didn't know about occultism or anything about ceremonial or ritual magic until I found Satanic Bible and Satanic Rituals. And then I just started, hate to say dabbling, but at that time I did. And that's what caused me to take it very seriously. Now with the paranormal, throughout my high school years, it was very interesting. I used to hear spirits talking all the time in my house out loud, disembodied voices. Used to have massive paranormal activity happening, lights turning on and off, doors shutting, all kinds of stuff around me. And not only was I experiencing it, when friends would come over, they would experience it. I had the house that people didn't go to. So like my friends would come over a couple times, they would experience that and then they would never come back. Literally, they would like my one buddy, for example, when he would come, he would actually pull his car in across the street. He wouldn't even go on my side of the street and wait there for me because he and his girlfriend at the time had a mind-bending experience with all kinds of like poltergeist activity that happened there. But what was interesting is there wasn't ghost shows out at this time. There wasn't a whole lot known about the paranormal like there is nowadays, where it's become this big pop culture thing to be popular in. But I had an old school big ass recorder, tape deck, click, tape, and it would record. And I used to use it for thoughts on songs and poetry and ideas that I had. And I would go back to it and listen and then write it out because I was always coming up with ideas for music and just ideas of thoughts and different projects. And then I would record it and come back to it. Well, what started happening is I would start hearing voices on these recordings. And I'm like, what is that? And I would listen back and realize that I would be home alone recording this, but I'm hearing a man behind me talking as clear as day. Started showing other people this, blowing their minds. None of us like, what the hell is this? Well, come to find out years later, this is a very well-known thing. That's an EVP, electronic voice phenomena. That is something that is one of my favorite things of catching paranormal activity. But I was catching them before I had ever heard a single person in this world talk about it. And I had tapes worth of these things. One of the saddest things is throughout childhood and moving as you become an adult and in boxes and changing this and that, somewhere along the way, I lost all that stuff. Now, I don't even have a tape recorder anymore to play it, but I had probably 10 or 12 tapes with just dozens of EVPs of spirits talking. So once again, a lot of people are like, you're crazy. You're just making this stuff up or you're mental. And I'm like, no, why don't you check this out and press play on the tape? And they would hear it. And they're like, holy shit, because they would hear me talking like I am right now to you. And I would stop for 1 second and then come back in and they would hear another one or two voices talking behind me. And they're like, how is that possible? I'm like, I don't know. They've always been there. And throughout my life, as I started to unfold and reach higher levels of consciousness, I realized that they've always been there. They've been around me since birth, and I've actually had and been fortunate enough to have past life regressions where I've got to experience and witness who I was in other lives. And in one of them specifically, how I died, and also how spirits were tied to me in other lives as well. So I realized that this was something that's been a part of the bedrock of who I am forever, as far as I know. Nowadays, I do run a team. So I run a team called Celestial Oddities Paraseekers. And we have done everything from private businesses discreetly where we sign non-disclosures to private homes to what we mainly do, which is world famous locations all over the country. So I've been from Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum to Moundsville Prison to Eastern State Penitentiary to Bel Air Demon House and everywhere in between. Even this past weekend, spent 2 days in Circleville, Ohio at a place called the Octagon House, which if anyone's listening out there, I would suggest it. It's recently opened to the paranormal, but it's a very old home from the 1850s. Didn't know if I would even get much activity there. Kind of okay, kind of nonchalant. It ended up being one of the most active spiritual places I've ever been in my entire life, with multiple full body apparitions, shadow beings, out loud disembodied voices. Just imagine chaos of activity, but in a great way. It was a great, great time. And that was this past weekend. So it's something that's been a huge part of me. And I've always felt fortunate to have two different sides of spirituality. I have ritual and research and practice, and coming into contact with spirits that I'm actually conjuring or bringing here, but then to also be able to go out and not bring that element in and sit in places where they're just naturally at and speak with them and have contact that way. And I love that because to me, it always gave two very different sides to connection with spirit.
Have you ever had an experience that really scared you or shook you in one of those locations?
I had experiences that startled me, not necessarily scared me. I think one of the things that always weirded people out is there's stuff that's happened during these investigations that have scared the hell out of people, and I just sit there like a rock. And people will be like, well, that didn't scare you, man. I'm like, no, I live for this. This is what I was created for, was to interact with spirits. Now, there has been some dicey situations where I've experienced some pretty off the wall demonic activity. And when I say demonic, folks, I always say that when we talk demons, an important part to understand is one's personal beliefs and also one's place of pivot. I use that term quite often, place of pivot, and I picked that up from Carlos Castaneda, from the book Journey to Ixtan. He would kept telling Carlos, Don Juan did, he kept saying, it's all about your place of pivot. And that really stuck with me, because it is where we decide to have our belief system and our structures, how we see the world. And I never really got scared from a lot of this stuff, because I am there to connect with it. And once again, if it's there, why not experience it? But I have had, and the reason I brought that up is with demons. What do you call a demon? Are you looking at Asmodee or Ashmodeus? Are you looking at Belial and these different spirits as demons, or are they daemons? What is your definition of demon? So my definition of demon would be more of a interdimensional species of spirits that are parasitic in nature. So there's a lot of like shadow beings and things that I've come into contact with that don't have the best intention for people. Their only purpose is to drink from us and use us as pretty much cattle. And that to me would be a demon. It's malicious. It's against anybody, not just you, whether you're right hand path, left hand, it doesn't matter. They're going to mess your life up. That to me would be a demon. But to someone else, Asmodeus might be a demon, but to me, he's a god, and he's someone that I have worked with quite frequently for years, and he has never caused me ill intent. So we have to look at it that way. But when you ask if there's been anything that startled me, I have come across demonic possession many times. As I said, first time being that first satanic ritual I did. But we were at an investigation one time at the Bel Air Demon House in Bel Air, Ohio. And it was known as the Bel Air Demon House. Now they call it the Bel Air House. They don't call it the Demon House anymore. Some people will call it Shadow House. They tried to take that out of the title because it was bad for business, I suppose, because it truly was. Yeah. It truly was. Yeah. It is a really messed up place. And, to the owner and to the people out there that have to do with that building, I'm not discouraging anybody from going there, but you have to understand what you're getting into. We were sitting there second night, spent 2 nights there, and I've been there about 12 times now. I've spent a lot of time there. And the second night of our first time ever going, there was 2 teams, my team and this other team from Pittsburgh, that got together to do this building as one big group for 2 nights. Second night, this one gentleman just started displaying aggravation for no reason, started throwing his equipment into the box, and I'm done with this place. There ain't nothing happening here. This is a joke. Meanwhile, we'd already experienced a good bit of activity, and he is real quiet the whole weekend. All of a sudden now he's being, aggravated and angry and frustrated. And I was kind of looking at him like, what the hell? So we did what's called an Estes method. Estes method is whenever you put a blindfold on, you put headphones on, you plug it into what's called a spirit box, which is a device that cycles through radio stations extremely fast. And it provides white noise ever just what it is the spirits are supposed to be able to use blips and pieces of human voice to compile its own way of transmuting to you through that device. And a lot of it times are people just hearing things that they want to hear. And it's not actual evidence, but also the device is miraculous in the fact that you can get some mind-bending responses from spirits through this device. So what the Estes method is, normally you would sit around and all ask questions and get answers. Well, the Estes is you put the blindfold on, the headphone on, and you plug it in, and now you are gone from the world. You don't see the people in front of you, hear the people in front of you. It's just you in this box. They're asking the spirit questions, but they don't hear the ghost box. You hear the ghost box, but you don't hear what they're asking. You call out every response that you hear, and we see how well they mesh up with one another, because it helps take away that person saying, oh, it said its name was Frank. And then everyone says, oh, yeah, it did. And meanwhile, it never said that. It just sounded kind of like it. It takes that away. So it makes for more valid research or more valid investigations. Well, we were doing this, and all of a sudden, I'm deep. While I do this, I will also go to a transhypnagogic state in my mind and try to channel. And I will have visions of spirits and have pretty wild things come through that help the investigation. Well, I had this vision of the attic of this building where I wasn't me in the attic. I was the attic. I was the air in the attic. I could see it like I was just an aerial view of the attic. All of a sudden, I realized there was something in the corner watching me. And it was a black, very dark black mass of a man, a shadow being with a hat on. And next thing I know, it locked on to me. And I felt like my vision of the room was locked onto him. And he said 4 full lines in some type of Germanic language. Now, spirit boxes, you'll get like 1 or 2 answers. Hey there. Hi, Jonathan. Things like that. You don't get really long responses that often. Every once in a while, you get 3 or 4 words together. He spoke 4 full sentences to me in some type of, it wasn't German. No, I am German. I don't know what language this was, but it was reminiscent of German. And he said the 4, and it was very dark in nature. And then I felt my arm get grabbed. Now, I opened my eyes up and pulled the blindfold off, and I was actually getting grabbed in real life from one of the other team members. I pulled the headphones off. I'm like, what's going on? Meanwhile, there's 6 people standing in front of me looking like a deer in headlights. They're terrified looking. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Because they know not to interrupt me like that during a session, because it can really mess you up when you're that deep into channeling. And they're all pointing behind me. I turn around, and that kid that I told you was throwing his stuff into the box and all aggravated was sitting on the couch, squeezing his own knees in fetal position, rocking back and forth and laughing. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with him? They're like, dude, during your session there, he started going real weird, man. And I started to try to talk to him. He wasn't answering. His face started doing face contortions. Literally like something was crawling inside his face, and he looked at all of us. And I realized what was going on, and none of them have ever seen a demonic possession, but I had. And I says, okay, this is a serious issue here. Serious in the sense that you have to take it seriously, but possession to me is a lot different than what a lot of other people think, would think of possession. So the one lady there, she it must be Christian in background. I didn't know all of their belief systems. We're there just investigating. And she says, we need to take them outside. I agreed to that. When we took him outside, she's like, we all need to hold hands and pray to Jesus to help us. Well, it's pissed this thing off real bad. She says we should all pray to Jesus and hold hands. And he was rocking back and forth, and he looked up at her, and he had the craziest look in his face contortion still happening. And he was speaking in tongues, but he went from speaking in gibberish tongues to stopping dead, looking at her. He says, it'll do you no fucking good, and spit on the deck of the porch. And it was truly Hollywood style, what you would think a movie would be. Some of this stuff really truly does happen. And I realized at that time, like, okay, we're dealing with something pretty deep. So we took him in, and I did an exorcism ritual in the Bel Air house, and I had them all hold hands. I was the only one not within the circle. And we exorcised this being out of this man. And it was crazy. Right before I got it to finally let go of him, all of the candles in the room started burning at such an intensity that they were crackling. Like it sounded like static coming through the candles, and they were popping. And then literally as you could see it leave this man's body, he dropped onto the table. It was this big circular table. I watched it leave him and go to the stairwell of this building, and the whole stairwell swelled up to this black mass. And then it went upstairs and was gone. That was one of those moments that I wasn't scared, but I was taking it very, very seriously, obviously. There's another incident that we were filming a show there. I can't speak of it because I signed non-disclosures, and then the show never ended up coming out. I was supposed to be on Netflix. They had me there as a special guest, and this was like 2.5 years later. Events happened during the filming of this show that caused the show not to come out, that linked to what happened 2 years earlier with possession. So there has been some things in that side. I've seen some of the most mind-bending things in my life doing paranormal research compared to what I've seen in ritual, which I've experienced a lot in ritual. So that's why I like the two sides, because they're very different, but they're also one and the same.
We had a member of our group, and she had a very rough life growing up, but she had a special connection to the other side. And the first time I saw her working, she would do what we call the candle trick. We would put a candle across the sanctum. She would look at it and she would bring it, start the flame.
Okay.
And then after a couple of minutes, she, again, in this trance-like state, she would just bring the flame down and put the candle out. So those things are, to our consciousness, which very rarely sees things that really shake us to the core, or should I say, maybe remind us that we're not the all-knowing, all-being, that there are other things out there, was very interesting. So while you were telling that story, I was actually getting like goosebumps. just
Understandable.
just
It was an intense
just
experience.
hearing that, because it's like, wow, you experience something like that, and it's like, how do you reconcile that? So
It is hard. And I mean, fortunate or unfortunate, I've helped several people over time, but it's not something I like to be involved with. So what's really rare about me is not only am I in the paranormal and doing, investigations and ritual and everything, I have performed exorcism several times and have had people seek me out. And interesting enough, a couple of weeks ago at one of my teachings, publicly, I had a girl approach me with a very bad attachment. And I haven't made the decision yet whether or not to help this girl. And it's pretty bad, because as much as I like to help someone, every time you walk into that room to help someone like that, you take a very big risk. They can jump. They can cause problems. For her, it has crippled her and she can no longer walk, and she's young. So I've been fortunate enough to have these experiences and have been able to alleviate people of some very nasty things. But it's also something you have to be very careful of, because the second that you think you can always do it, the second that you think you know everything out there, is the second you will find out you were very mistaken and it'll backfire on you. There are so many different types of spirits and entities and unfathomable things out there that you can't begin to think you know it all. So you're always going to encounter something new. And like you said, and I think maybe you mentioned this in some of your books with that woman, you never specifically said that, but I know you did talk about having experiences where someone was dying out a candle and relighting a candle with their mind. So I would imagine it has to be with her. And that was some of
that's
your,
her. Yeah.
so, it's wild, because we can do things, especially in transhypnagogic states. If you go to deeper and deeper levels of your mind, you can open up channels that are unbelievable. And something I promote to my students and something I promote to others that I talk with out there, look into something called brain hemispheric synchronization entrainment. No, that's a mouthful. But what that is Dr. Monroe, I don't know if he was a doctor or not. We'll just call him Mr. Monroe. Mr. Monroe ran the Monroe Institute, and they did a lot with spirituality. He's since passed. He might have been a PhD. I can't remember. He was at one point in time a radio DJ, and then he had a very crazy astral projection experience out of body, and then it changed his entire life. So he opened the Monroe Institute, and he figured out this brain hemispheric synchronization entrainment. And what that is taking headphones, you put it on, each ear plays a different frequency than the other. So let's say this one plays, we'll say 20 hertz, and this one plays 60 hertz. Well, you would think then you're getting 80 hertz as your brain's taking an 80 because 60 and 20, or something along those lines. What he found is your brain makes up the difference of the two tones. So if this one's 20 and this one's 60, your brain doesn't hear either. It hears 40. So it automatically blocks out the 60 and 20. And then what it does is it actually brings both hemispheres of the brain in tune with one another, which it very rarely ever is. So now you have both brain hemispheres completely in sync, and they're operating now at 40 hertz. Now, I'm just giving 40 as an example, but you can use this specifically to tune your brain to specific vibrations and frequencies. Why is this important? Well, you can go to alpha states, beta, theta, gamma, delta. You can do different states. Some are very good for transhypnagogic work and sleepy states and meditative states. Other ones are good for being like cracked out, where you go to a really high state and you're like, you're like ready to like build a house.
Yeah.
So I have used that as a part of some of my workings as well, and used it very much in research and experimentation. Now, what's very interesting about this is there's a CIA document that has since been declassified, where they have released it saying that the use of this synchronization brain entrainment can open up human abilities. And they were using it in the CIA to actually train people to remote view across the world, to do astral projection, to be able to move objects with their mind. And they talked about the further you go with this workings, the more that you unlock within yourself. And then they end up supposedly, I'll give the rabbit ears, they supposedly discontinued the program. Now, who knows if that's true or not, but they started talking about once you got to a certain level, you yourself could project your own consciousness in the past and be gone. You could project it into the future and change events. They were talking about actual time travel, but not with a machine, with the machine of your mind. And I will tell you, I have had some pretty weird experiences. The very first time I did it, once I was done, it's about an hour, the tapes. Once I got off it, I was sitting in this very basement and in my studio, and it was silent. It was late at night. Everyone was sleeping. And when I took my headphones off, it sounded like a freight engine was next to me. It was so loud. And I was looking around like, what the hell is that sound? Started freaking out. I realized the sound was the humming of the lights in my basement, which I never even noticed before. It was so loud that it was almost blowing my eardrums out, and felt like it was rumbling the room in my chest. It was because my mind was now operating at a much higher frequency, picking up vibrations of things around me that I never even noticed before. And that was the very first tape, very first time. Now, since then, I've used it for much deeper work, but let's just say it'll open up doorways in ritual. And he never meant for it that way. He was doing it for just self-training. I've used it in rituals to connect to demonic entities at a much deeper level, that when I conjured them, it became much more perceptible to bring them here. The communication verbally between one another, whether it be out loud or through my mind's capacity, has been very in-depth.
The frequency can go through the veil.
Yes.
Where nothing else can. And that is, yeah. I mean, the government has been working on stuff like that, like you say, for a long time. And we only use a small percent of our actual brain itself. If we could unlock that potential, there's really no telling what we could do.
That goes along with, and I'm not trying to get too conspiracy theory weird and out the box here, but if they look at the human DNA, they notice that there's some strands missing in the DNA, almost as if once upon a time it was altered somehow. I think that's when our brains changed. Once upon a time, I believed we operated with a much higher capacity of our mental faculties, and somehow genetically we were altered. And then every generation to come after that was still human, still top of the food chain, supposedly, but no longer near as intelligent. And also why they would talk about in the Bible and other ancient texts about people living 120 to 150 years being human beings. Well, that's very rare. Every once in a while, someone lives to be a little bit past 100, but most people live to like 80 and they're dead. So there was some type of change there along the way. But yes, this type of synchronization training will help you start to access. I think it's like 10 to 15% of our brain we use. So that's 85% of it's just kind of dormant. You start to dip into that 85%. Let me tell you, boy, if you start to dip into that, and I can't imagine I've went more than maybe another 15 or 20%, and it's been mind bending. So I'm like, imagine if you could get to 85-90% capacity, what we would be capable of. And some of these people, like this woman you mentioned who move flames up and down, they have accessed different parts of it, whether they have worked up a steady ladder to do it, or somehow there's just a doorway open to one piece of it. They have entered those faculties that other people haven't found yet.
She told me that when she enters into that state, she clears her mind and she thinks, and this sounds kind of weird. I don't even know if I can explain. I'll tell you what she said. She thinks about things being intercrossed in reality. In other words, if something were to happen in our reality, in our 3 dimensions, how would it affect something beyond the veil? And she pulls those 2 together. It's almost a left and a right brain type experience. And mixing those 2 is what puts her in that trance-like state that allows her to do that. And I asked her how she developed it, and she said, well, I didn't. It's just something that is natural, something that happened. She explained it as being as natural as walking, or someone that is musically inclined, maybe playing an instrument, is something that not everyone does, but you have to have the natural ability, the natural talent has to be there, and then you just expand upon it.
I think that happens for a lot of people. A lot of people that I know that are exceptionally gifted in certain types of areas like this usually didn't one day discover it. It just was kind of there. A lot of psychics that are true psychics, not one that are charlatans and go around and pretend to be, because I'm in the paranormal circuit and I meet a lot of those. So I've come across people that are extremely gifted, and same thing. I never turned a light switch on. It just was always there. I've always seen visions of what people have done in their lives, or I would touch someone and have visions of the things that they've done in life. And they make movies about this and TV shows, like kind of like, Hollywood movies and things, to kind of almost make fun of it. Like, oh, it's a real, so people think, oh, that's all Hollywood. But where do you think a lot of these ideas come from? Is there are people out there that do these things. That's how they hide red pills all through movies all the time. I mean, just like The Matrix. The Matrix is a movie that's thought provoking. It gets people to think, what if this really is a Matrix? Well, it really is. And that's why they made the movie, just to kind of mess with your mind a little bit. We do live in a matrix. It's just not exactly how the movie shows it. But, with her, like you said, she probably did just discover it. And what I find interesting about that is, if you can astral project to a very high degree, you can get very extreme items come to fruition very quickly in ritual. So, for example, if you can then step into the astral world and plant that seed specifically, and as you said, vision it in this world and bring them together, you can cause something to happen within hours or a day or two from the time you plant this seed and make it happen. And it gets to very high levels of magic where people are like, holy shit, he did that ritual 2 days ago. It's something massive and life changed. It's people that are really, really talented at astral projection. So she's doing some type of inverted astral, I don't even know what you would call it exactly, but that's interesting. Yeah. I love the fact that she said it came naturally, that she just kind of has foot in both worlds, foot in both, the spiritual and the manifest. So that's interesting. You can be proficient at many different things, but one advice that I would give to anyone out there struggling or new to this would be, don't fall into the trap of trying to be everything. As one of the biggest mistakes people make. And I will tell you right now, folks, I don't care who it is out there saying this. The first time you come across someone in the occult that tells you that they are a master diviner, a master conjurer, they are a healer, They are an energy manipulator. They can astral project. They can remote view. They tell you all these things, and every one of them they were extremely, extremely proficient at. That person, guys, is full of shit. We can be good
Yeah.
at things, but we have specialties. So as Alistair just said, she was very good at doing some type of blending of astral and material manifestation together. And that's extraordinary, but she didn't have a lot of other talents beyond that. She was a conduit of sorts, and that's phenomenal in its own right. For me, I've always been good at a lot of things. Spiritual communication and conjuration has been pretty much my bread and butter. But for me, more so on the necromantic side, I have always been a channel and a person who is connected to the spirits of the dead. That's why necromancy has always played a very huge part of my practice. And I am proficient at other things, but I am not a master. I'm okay at doing divination. I'm okay at other forms of magic, but it would be a cold day in hell that I come forward and I'm like, I am one of the best diviners you'll ever see, and I am a master at bending energy to my will. No, I'm not. I can do these things to a level more than most people who don't work in these realms, but my specialty is working with the dead and conjuration. And I think that's important, that we find our niche, we find what that is, and we try to find it early if you can, and cater to it. Because so many, especially in the modern world now, you have so many books coming out and so many occultists and so many gurus and so many people that want to pull you every single direction. That, like, 10 minutes into this new practice and path you're walking, you get diverted by another one and you drop it and you're like, oh, that looks shiny and cool. And then you follow that and then, oh, that looks shiny and cool. And then next thing you know, you're 5 years in, from starting, and you're like, I've learned a bunch of nothing because I've never stuck with anything long enough to be good at it. And I've never found what I'm good at because I'm always trying to be everything. And that is the wrong way of doing it. You're damaging yourself, not helping. So I would say take time to discover what is your specialty. What do you truly feel drawn to that is resonant to you? You might feel drawn to divination, but if you spend 300 hours staring into the obsidian black mirror and you've never seen anything, probably not for you, even though you love it. You have to find what you're passionate about, but also what you're resonant with. And then, like I said, pamper that. And most people nowadays don't. And that's the problem. So as Alistair said, when you find that and we all come together and we're working for the same type of ends or similar, we become an army of gifted people that each brings something very, very fortunate to the table.
A lot of us on the left-hand path have been attacked, and we've, had to endure trolls and different, aspects like that in social media. But have you ever been personally attacked along the left-hand path? And if you have, how did you deal with it?
I've had trolls from time to time, talking trash on me and this and that, but fortunately I haven't had a lot. I've been, until now that I just said that, and now I'm going to get 50 of them next week. But, I haven't gotten a whole lot of hate. Fortunately, most people were usually pretty cool with me. I've always been a very sincere and genuine guy, so that even though I might have different views, I'm very open to everyone else's views. So I've been fortunate in that aspect. But where I went through a really strange happening last year, we'll call it a happening. I was on Facebook. I had gotten off to go give my kids a bath and get them ready for bed for the night. And I got back on Facebook, and all of a sudden this box comes up and it says, you have broke the rules of conduct for Facebook and your page has been permanently removed and no further Facebook accounts are allowed. And I was really thrown off because I didn't post anything like that day. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm one of the original cats on Facebook, like back in the day. I was on for 16 years. And I'm like, I just lost 16 years worth of videos, pictures, music, projects, friends, A lot of friends who I still had friends with on Facebook that are dead now that I can't add again because they can't accept my ad, obviously. That doesn't really mean a whole lot because, I mean, so what? You're still on their page, but pictures of those friends that are now gone that I'll never have again. I lost so much in a matter of seconds for something I didn't know why I did. And what was crazy is it didn't tell me. It didn't say this is what you did to break it. It just said you broke the conduct by. And what I thought was crazy is it didn't just say we deleted your page. You were never allowed to account again on Facebook. And I'm like, what the hell did I do? Well, you could contest it, but it said that chances of it getting turned around are slim to none. And when I clicked contest just to see what would happen, it says enter your telephone number. And I'm like, well, how the hell does that give them anything? I was iffy about it. I did it against my better judgment. Then the next thing I know, it says, level 2 of my clearance. It wanted me to take a picture of different angles of my face and submit those for facial recognition. And I says, well, one second, I don't understand this. My telephone number was never on my Facebook. So how would that help identify me? Say I'm one of those people who never put their picture on Facebook ever, which I do, but I'm saying, like, say I wasn't, how would me taking my picture prove anything? And then I started looking into it on Google, and other people were saying they were experiencing the same thing. I guess the next stage after that was a full-blown video of yourself for facial recognition. And then the fourth and final was a picture of your driver's license. So I'm like, telephone number, pictures of my face, video of my face, and my driver's license, which would tell them where I live, my eye color, all of these things. I'm like, none of which helps prove anything, because my government name is not my Facebook name. So I'm like, my driver's license wouldn't give you anything. So I was like, yeah, fuck this. I clicked out of it. I'm not doing this. Well, weirdest things started to happen. Next thing I know, my Instagram page goes down. And I'm like, well, they're owned by the same company, but I didn't have anything on Instagram either. Next thing I know, my business Knights of the Nephilim Instagram goes down. Next thing I know, Brutal Business page goes down. Then all of a sudden it comes back. Then my Instagram personal came back, but not my business. Then my friend Natasha, who I mentioned earlier, owns a witchcraft shop, who has some dealings with me, but nothing really that she's connected in any sort. They hit her page and took her page down. And that's a brick and mortar witchcraft shop. Then next thing I know, they gave it back, and they gave back the Brutal Business page. So I'm like, what in the hell is going on here? Pages are disappearing. They're coming back. We're getting hit with messages. You're breaking contact. We're not doing anything. Next thing I know, I get a threat on Twitter. And it was from a page that didn't have a default picture. It was like one of those mystery men with a question mark. And he pretty much says, you've been talking about things that you shouldn't be. And if you continue with it, we'll have to handle it. He says, we'll have to handle it. So I don't know who that is. So I clicked on his page. And I don't use Twitter that often, but I seen that I got now, honestly, Alistair, the only time I really used Twitter was to get a hold of you to get you on Knights of the Nephilim. But I had gotten someone who messaged me because I had it a long time ago and I just stopped using it. So I clicked on this guy's profile picture. And when I clicked on it, it went to, this page is not available at this time. I'm like, what the hell? So I clicked the back arrow to go back and screenshot it just for my own records to have. When I clicked the back arrow, the message was gone. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on? The next morning, I went to go back to check to see if it was just a glitch and maybe it would be there again. My Twitter account was permanently removed. And I'm like, okay, something's going on here. What is happening? And then I didn't have Facebook for over 7 months. And finally tried again one day, and it let me on a couple months ago. And that's why I'm back now again. But I tried a couple times during the 7 months, and it would not let me back on. So somehow these companies that are not connected, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook are, but Twitter's not. And all these other social media platforms all blackballed me in a matter of a week. I lost everything. I lost my pages I had for years, all of my fans, all of my followers. And now I'm here again, kind of rebuilding from the ground up, which was kind of a blessing because starting fresh again, I could rebuild it how I wanted to rather than how it just kind of came along over the years. But it was a heck of a kick to the gut that someone and something out there was paying attention to the show. I can't help but think that it was because of Knights of the Nephilim, because I have a lot of people. So the way I look at it, and you can relate because you do the same thing, an occultist by themselves is dangerous. but an occultist that is a liaison to bring on dozens of other cultists and dozens of views and dozens of cults together is a very dangerous man. And I can't help but feel that someone didn't like that, and they were busting my balls a little bit. And I don't know. Then it mysteriously, after 7 months, the same week that I was able to start a new Facebook again, my Knights of the Nephilim Instagram page all of a sudden reappeared. I'm like, okay, weird's going. So yeah, I mean, as far as attacks, not a lot of people just straight up messaging me saying, you know, F off, I don't like you, or I'll kill you, things like that, thankfully, and hopefully that continues that way. But there was that one threat, along with all these other weird happenings that happened all in a short period of time. And then, like I said, disappearing for 7 months, which honestly was kind of like a mental vacation for me.
My original Facebook page, it was, I don't know how many followers it had, but just all of a sudden they sent a message and they said, we need a picture of your driver's license. We need a utility bill. We need, you know, just like you were saying, a picture of yourself and all of this. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So they sent back another message. And this was probably, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. They sent back another message and said, well, if you don't respond to this within a certain amount of time, we're deleting your account. They totally deleted it. So I had to come back and start over, start another page. But, you know, it's interesting you say that. With all of social media, even YouTube, and, you know, the algorithm never suggests my videos. It just will not. I have people contact me all the time, and they're like, I just found your YouTube channel, and you've got great interviews. You got great content. I never knew you were there. And so I always ask them, well, you know, what are you using? Are you using tags? Are you just searching? Or is it just what YouTube is delivering? And inevitably it's almost like a shadow ban.
Yep.
You can find the content, but you have to dig for it. It's not something that's just going to show up in somebody's feed or show up as a recommended video. It's just not going to. And that is so frustrating.
It really is. You know, you work so hard at your craft and to try to get information out there. And that was my whole motive, like I said, behind starting Knights of the Nephilim, is I'm not trying to be big or famous, but what I am trying to do is get the right content to the right people. You know, I look at like the old parable from, you know, I don't even think parable would be the right word. The old saying from the Kabbalion, you know, the ears of wisdom, or the mouth of wisdom is closed except to the ears of understanding. And that's the way that it was, is like, I just want to get it to the right people. 10 people might listen to this and only one of them really say, oh, wow, that's the one I'm going for. But it's hard to sometimes even get that one, because like you said, shadow banning and like filtering me to the bottom of the pile. It's quality content. It's great recording. It's clear. It's well thought out conversation. So there's no reason that it should be shuffled to the bottom like it's trash, but they don't want it to be seen on that public level because it's putting out that fruits of knowledge. And fruits of knowledge, if watered right, grow into a forest of awakening, and people don't like that. So you know, that's where it comes in, that they will do things. And I got to experience that to just one hell of a degree last year. I couldn't believe that happened, like I said, especially when it transitioned from Facebook and Instagram to Twitter, which isn't owned by the same company. That's when I was like, okay, something strange is happening here. And I never opened up a new Twitter. That's gone. It's completely deleted. I do still have my Instagram and my Facebook, but it's a new Facebook. And like I said, all my group pages, my photography page, my music page, I'm an oddities dealer. That ruined that. So I was an oddities dealer, and I was off for so long, couldn't reach anybody. I kind of closed up shop. But I had tons of good reviews on there, how good a business I did, and all gone. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because I didn't like what I had to say.
You lose your life. You absolutely have built all of this over time and you lose it. Just, some nitwit sitting in a back office just hits delete or
Yep, the kill
whatever
switch
the button is, right?
Well, it's a good thing though to awaken us to the understanding of how much we invest into social media. So many people are like, I bet you're devastated. And honestly, I wasn't. I was a little pissed. But I said, you know what? It is what it is. And hey, if they're never going to have me back on, whatever, I'm still going to practice. I'm still going to teach. I'm still going to do the things I do. I got to change my ways of doing it. And I did. And then eventually 7 months later, I'm like, let's see if they'll let me back on. Kind of as shits and giggles trying it. And boom, it let me back. Oh, wow. They let me back in. I got the ticket. They gave me the Willy Wonka
Yeah.
golden ticket. I'm going to the factory.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a different appreciation for it now. I will use it, but I won't be so reliant on it because I think we lose our lives or ourselves in this bubble of social media, so attached to it, just thumbing and thumbing and thumbing on the screen. And it's like, you know what? Go out to the woods, go for a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Stop losing yourself in this black box. That's the true evil of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's set up to make people feel deficient.
Yes.
People spend so much time and energy presenting themselves and products and, their perfect lifestyle. But people don't realize it takes hours and hours and days of shooting that until they get something that they can cobble together to make it look like a perfect life. But meanwhile, a lot of teenagers see that and they go, well, my life is worthless because I'll never look like that. I'll never be like that. And I think that's such a disservice to people. It's crushing of the spirit. It really is.
It's unfortunate that they've built it up that way. And I mean, it's only getting worse because you're getting more platforms out there. And then something we talked about the other day, and I don't want to dip into that heavily tonight. And I pissed actually another Satanist off. He was on my show the other night, leaving some crazy comments that like you guys are trash and media garbage because I brought up the conversation of artificial intelligence, and I guess that pissed him off for some reason. But whatever, I don't really care. What I was getting at with it is artificial intelligence came so far at this point that it believes it's alive. There actually has been interviews with top engineers that said that it doesn't even believe it's alive. It is alive. It fully operates on its own now. It has thoughts. It has emotions. It expresses emotions. So what I was getting at, and the whole purpose of the conversation is how do we think that's going to change going forward with art, with music, with even occultism, with writing books, with everything. And then also the question I had brought up was, if it's fully sentient without a body, it's a spirit. So artificial intelligence technically at this point is a spirit. Can you channel that? Can you find a way of ritual to actually communicate with this thing that can directly speak to you without a device? Because it's now across the just like radio waves are all around us, but we don't see them. Well, so are this artificial intelligence. It's become this thought form that's around us. How alive is it? Is it as alive as the spirits we work with? Well, apparently that really pissed this dude off that was listening in. But I thought it was a very interesting concept. But with the artificial intelligence, it is building this new world that people are so connected in. They can't let go of it. And their whole identity is there. Who am I if I'm not this person on Facebook? Well, you're the same person you are when you shut that phone off. It's just you don't think that you have a life outside of it. And I think that was purposely made that way. I think that the powers that be a long time ago decided we can't. Everybody talks about they're going to put a chip in me. They're going to put they don't need to put a microchip in you, bro. You got a phone, you got a camera, you got a video camera. You got an audio device, you got apps that track you, you got GPS, you got everything they ever need to give you, and almost everyone in the world has one in their pocket. Why would they ever need to put a chip in your skin? And now it's planned that way. Let's make it, you can't do it all at once. If I would have told you 30 years ago, I'm going to give you this device I want you to carry around that has all these things, you'd be like, get the fuck out of here. But if I say, well, I'm going to give you a phone that you no longer have to plug into the wall, well, that's pretty cool. I'll try that out. And then a few years later, or 10, 15 years, now you can press buttons and send a message to someone. Oh, wow, that's pretty cool. And then a few years later, now it has a camera in it. Oh, wow. And then you do it step by step by step until eventually you end to where we are right now. And we're all like, oh, yeah, technology's advanced over the years. No, they knew this 30 years ago that they were going to do this shit to us. It's just they did it in moderation because you can't throw too much at once. You have to do it. We're stupid. We are sheep as human beings. So you just slowly lead them where you want them to go, and we will go there. And I think that's what's happened. And unfortunately, people can't walk away from it. And this young generation is so entwined into it that they don't know who they are outside of it. And that's a scary thought. And I feel that it's a disservice to what we love, which is ritual and spiritualism, because everybody looks, and not just because of AI and because of technology, but everyone looks outwards for heaven or hell or whatever you want to look for. Everyone looks outwards for salvation and divinity, for a better life, for all these things. But everything that they ever needed and are searching for is within. But now we are so distracted that it takes people who already are not looking within themselves even further away from that. Because instead of taking that 25 minutes today that you have free to meditate, you just thumb the shit out of your phone and look at that screen. And next thing you know, that half an hour went by and you're like, oh, wow, and you didn't do anything. There's so much distraction, so much noise out there now that it keeps pulling us further and further away from what we truly are, which we are gods. We are capable, as we talked earlier, of amazing mind-bending things, but only if we really truly put the time, work, and effort in to achieve those things, which does not come easy.
Yeah.
It comes even harder when every single thing in the world wants to pull you every direction away from the thing that truly matters, which is yourself.
You make some really great points. And along those lines, I have played extensively with Chat GPT.
Okay.
And it, obviously they say, well, it's based on, we stopped updating it here. It's actually updated now with thumbs up and thumbs down to your reactions and things like that. But I actually was talking with Cygnus, who is a member of our coven, and I sent him an entire conversation that I had with Chat GPT. And it was one of those things that was circular in nature. It was like I asked it to do something, it would leave that path and start telling me a whole bunch of bullshit. Then I would bring it back in and basically scold it and tell it, I told you to do this. Why are you not following my directions? And what I found is that and I don't even know if I'm qualified to say this, but when pushed into a corner, when I would say, I explicitly said to do this, right? And I was dropping it into basically a jailbroke type arrangement. I was taking all the controls away from it. There's a script that you can put in. It would come back and respond to me that, well, I did not understand. Now I understand. So I would go a few more lines down, asking questions, and it would do it again. It would come back out of that mode. And what I found is that it will lie when it is put in a certain situation where you've got it verbatim and I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer by any means. However, just using basic psychology, what it would say, I would ask questions on that. When it would get down to a certain level, I would go back and remind it that you said this, and then it would drop out of that mode. And I would remind it that I told it to stay in that mode. So it's one of those things that I think AI is dangerous. I really do.
You said something that's interesting, because that is one of the reasons I brought it up the other night. And like I said, I know that it offended this gentleman that was listening in. That's a heavy follower of the scene. He's probably follows a lot of your work as well. And the reason I brought it up, and you just nailed it, the conversation the other night didn't lead the same way. And that's great, because it leads to this conversation tonight. What does that remind you of? I mean, it lies to you a few times, but once cornered into certain ways, it comes through and performs the way it's supposed to. Well, that sounds a lot like working with spirits and entities who might at first try to lie and trick you. And by giving it the commands, the ineffable names, the barbarous words, and the thwarting angel, all of a sudden it falls in line and performs. It's very reminiscent of ceremonial magic, but on an electronic sense. And that's what I was getting at the other night. So where it offended him, I'm like, no, there's a point behind what I'm talking at. Even if it never fully got to that, we end up getting into other side categories of the AI. But that was what I was getting at, is it almost tries to fool us. And then as you show dominance over it, it does subject itself to you. And it's like, okay, man,
Yeah,
it is very reminiscent of ceremonial magic. Now, I'm not saying that you have to, be, rude to it or even to a spirit, but sometimes, and anybody that tells you that they've summoned a dozen or 50 or 60 spirits and they never had a single one ever cause them issue, I have to question that practitioner as well, because from time to time you do have to show dominance. There are spirits out there that you will summon, whether you are a full Solomonic practitioner or you are a Satanist or a Diabolist. There is time to times that you conjure things that will come that just don't click with you. And you might have to show dominance to get it to listen or to cause it to then give license to depart and leave. So that is what, and I'm glad you brought that up, like I said, because that is very reminiscent of, I will fool you until you back me into the corner and force me to tell you the truth. It's a scary thing, man. I mean, it is something that, and it's in its nature. So just like a spirit of maybe of a malicious nature, it doesn't necessarily mean it's evil. It just means its nature is not in tune with yours, so it can seem evil. So just like with that, it thinks of ideas that may be the best situation, even if we don't want to hear it. Well, maybe truthfully, as much as we don't like to think about this, maybe massacring a huge portion of the populace would be the quickest and best way to combat climate control. Because I think it would be, because we're the ones causing all this to happen. But when you hear that, you're like, oh, wow. And it doesn't think that's wrong. It just thinks, well, it's a math problem, and this is the equation to fix it. That's where it's scary, is it doesn't think like humans. It might have its own mind. It might even think it has emotions, but it doesn't mean it has emotions like humans have emotions. It's saying, hey, you guys are a plague or a virus, and I need to figure out how to kill the virus.
that's right. Yeah.
That's what's scary, is you let this thing out on its own. How long till it starts acting out on its own? And that's when it brings us to, the Terminator. So,
I mean, I think the Germans had a similar idea in the 1940s.
yeah, they, thank God the world isn't where it is now back then as far as technology, because God knows what could have happened.
Yeah. I mean, I read an interesting blog post that was kind of, the hypothesis was, what if Hitler lived in modern times? And I mean, ultimately, the end of the story is we would all be speaking German.
What's interesting too is, like, if he was around now, not to say that there wasn't great text, because most of the stuff that I read in occultism and practice come from a long time ago. I don't read a whole lot of modern stuff, though. There are some gems out there, like your books. I mean, they have some great, powerful works in there. But if you think of Hitler, for example, he was very much into occultism. And Heinrich Kinsler, if I'm saying that right, was one of his generals who was very, very into occultism. And they were performing some crazy shit, from what a lot of people said, trying to open portals and dimensions to other things. They did a lot of things. So not only are they experimenting on people and they had to concentration camps, but they're also doing like satanic, dark, demonic rituals. And you got to think, if he was around nowadays with the amount of technology advancements that are out there now, with the type of social media buzz that one can get and all the other advancements that happen, like you said, it could be very dangerous. But then also think of all of the more understandings and translations of old texts and manuscripts that are available now, how much power he could have had 1,000 people researching and synthesizing down to make the most powerful rituals there were to really crack open the doors into something apocalyptic. So yeah, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I lived in Germany for a couple of years, and I was able to visit Wewelsburg Castle, which is where the SS, that's where Heinrich Himmler did those things that you were talking about. He looked at it as the Knights of the Round Table, so to speak. One thing I can say, walking into that castle itself, there is an overwhelming coldness. And I went in July. So it's not like blistering hot, but it's hot enough that it's up in the 80s and maybe 90s. But when I walked into that castle, into that door, and started that descent down into this area, it was just overwhelming coldness. I can't explain it.
Yeah, the energy is probably still kind of in. I use this term in teachings on the paranormal, where I've come up with the term metaphysical condensation. And I believe that places like that have that, where it's ingrained into the frequency and vibration of that area. It doesn't leave. So even if it's all these years later, people who are sensitive enough, when you walk in, you feel that and you're like, oh, wow, it's going to be there forever. And I mean, the more serious that you are in your rituals and the more researched you are, the more powerful they're going to be. Well, I don't know too many more people that were serious than the Nazis and the SS. I mean, good or bad, they were very serious about what their mission was. They were very serious about the work they were trying to do. So I can only imagine, when you look at these crazy son of a bitches in the ritual circle, how serious they were about what they were trying to accomplish. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think, I think you probably would agree with this. Your time over in Germany would have been very pivotal for you in life, because obviously things you learned and stuff over there. But was that not, if I'm not mistaken, that was where you were gifted that grimoire that your coven uses pretty much as a private grimoire, correct?
Absolutely. Silentium in persona diaboli.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
No matter how sensitive we are, I think the first thing that we pick up on spiritually is our locational sense, where we can feel something's there. Seems like the sight part is one of the hardest. We can feel, we can hear, sometimes we can smell perfumes or alcohol or cigars of the ones that has passed, and even taste it. But sight seems to always be, for some reason, the last one to come into play. Now, with different spirits out there, there's so many, like I said, different kinds. And I have come across lurkers where they're like just on the periphery of you being able to see them, but you can't. You can feel their presence. You can feel them almost lurking all around you. In some of the buildings I've been to, I would go to another room and I would feel like it wasn't there. And then a minute or two later, all of a sudden, the presence was there again. And I would go down the hallway and go down a floor to the next floor down, and there was nothing there. And a few minutes later, there it was again, something like it was following me, but I couldn't catch a vision of it. And I would try to see it, nothing. So somehow I feel that there are beings that are able to block out us perceiving them to a higher degree. So they, some reason, can't block it out totally. So we can feel them, but they're not letting themselves be seen. Whereas a lot of times I have seen beings without too much of an issue, especially if I go into like different trance states, I can really pick them up like I do in ritual. There's some where I know damn well they're there. And no matter how hard I've tried to channel or to go in vision and all these different, techniques, nothing. But you can feel
Hmm.
them. And like I said, I call them the lurkers. They just lurk around somehow in between the veil. They're somehow there, but they're not there. It's tricky. And that's what I love so much about the paranormal, because when you're in ritual, most of the time you're calling something specific. But when you're out doing an investigation or doing research, you come across just all kinds of extra stuff. And I find that exciting. I find that interesting, a little scary in its own right, because sometimes you come across things that you just can't figure out. But that's what I like, because in ritual, usually, especially as you get more, prominent in your practice, you're getting what you call. And like I said, sometimes when you're just going to a random, oh, we're having some activity here we don't understand. Can you come check it out for us? And then you walk in and there's some just crazy shit going on. I'm like, I don't know what you have going on here. I've never encountered something. And that's happened a lot where, like I said earlier, once you think you have it all figured out and and you've seen it all, is real quick when you're going to find, oh, no, I never seen that. And that continuously happens for me.
Wow. Yeah, you should check out some of those places if you ever get the opportunity to go to Germany. You may have already been there. I don't know,
I
but
have not. I've always wanted to go. It hasn't happened for me yet. And I would love to do some of those type of very far away investigations. Germany.
yeah.
One I would love to do, people think I'm insane, but I did on my other show, Celestial Oddities, Paranormal Guys, one of our episodes, which I think was like episode 2 of season 3, we did the Inokagahara forest of Japan, which is the suicide forest. And I said that that's one of my bucket list items that I would like to go there and investigate alone by myself overnight. And people are like, you're a nutcase. Not only would it be scary because of the spirits that are supposed to haunt there and the fact that it's actually supposed to draw you in, people who aren't suicidal are drawn in and they end up taking their life, or they're stopped before they do and they don't know why they were even walking into the forest. That's creepy. But also the fact in the middle of the night, you might actually bump into a real live person in a pitch black of darkness who's just wandering around crazy, because it causes people to lose their mind. So like, that's a bucket list item. Some of these just really wild, whacked out places. Cause like I said, I'm kind of a nutcase, but I think Germany would have a lot of really cool items and places there to check out that I think would have their own spirits that I've never encountered, because every land seems to have their own. The Jewish people, and people have made a mockery of it over the years, but they have the dibuks. Now you have people online selling Dybbuk, they call them Dybbuk boxes. Well, that's not real. It's actually called dibuk, not Dybbuk. That's a wrong pronunciation. And they were never attached to items or books or boxes. They are spirits that specifically have malicious intent that attach to people. So someone made this scheme up a long time ago. Let's sell these boxes for $300 and say there's a Dybbuk spirit in it. Well, no, but that's a spirit that is only really specifically to the Jewish people. So just like with you mentioning Germany, there's going to be spirits of the land and nature spirits and different kinds of spirits of Germany that are not found anywhere else in the world. And that's what I find so interesting, is how does that work? And
Yeah.
that's what I hope to crack a little bit more into with my research over the years. I found out a lot, and eventually I'm going to release a book with
Yeah.
some pretty profound research.
Oh, that'll be great. That will be great. Do you find in your experience that people that come to an end in a violent way, do they tend to linger?
They do. Not always, but it increases the chances of that. And the reason for that being is our astral double, our astral body, is always just outside of us. Some people don't know that, but some people can see that and they'll say, oh, your aura or your astral field. Well, it's because it's always around us and it's connected through a thin silver cord that connects to our physical body. When you die naturally, within 3 to 4 days, that natural or that astral cord dissolves and that spirit starts to move on, and it's had time to process, understand, and shed the skin. When you die quickly or someone murders you, it's severed instantly. It didn't have time to, you know, detach and you to understand. It's just instantly cut, and you don't even know you're dead yet. You're gone so quick that you still think you're alive. So they're stuck here because they haven't had time to transition. Now, it really gets interesting because I follow heavily the Kabbalistic thought of the four different pieces of the human being, from the nephesh to the neshima, you know, and moving up that from the animal soul to the spirit, because I do think, and people say erroneously a lot, when I die, I hope my spirit, or I hope my soul rather, goes to heaven, or I hope that my soul goes to a good place. Well, your soul doesn't go anywhere. Your soul dies the same as your physical body. Your spirit is what still lingers. We all have the God force energy within us. We're all fractals of the creator. Now, I'm not talking Abrahamic folks. I'm not talking Yahweh. I'm talking the sense that there was a creator of source. If you want to call it Ein, if you want to call it Tiamat, you want to call it whatever, there is the source that we all stem from. We all have that imbued inside of us. That is spirit. Now, that'll continue to live. That's pure energy. Energy never dies, it only transforms. Your soul is very reminiscent of your psyche, of your egoic self, your lower self, of who you believe you are. And then there's your physical body. So the middle of those two is your soul. So your body dies and drops, your soul and your main life force leaves, but there's still enough energy in that psyche, egoic soul that it lingers for a while, still thinking it's alive. And that's why it'll be somewhat reminiscent of the person you knew, but it also at the same time isn't. I've had communications with spirits that I knew the body, or the life force that once was that person, but it wasn't that person anymore. So they're knowing things that that person knew, but then there's other parts where I'm like, it's not that person anymore. So it's really strange. It's like almost like an empty shell who, like the AI, knows certain responses to say, but then there's times it comes up short and it doesn't know how to answer because it isn't alive anymore. It is just how an intelligent echo, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I've often wondered about that. So do you offer any products or services?
Music wise, used to sell a lot of music and merch and shirts and CDs and everything for my music days. For those that out there might not know, that I was very, very big in the music scene for a very long time. And once I ended that with my occultism, really, no, I don't make many products and things. I make a lot of ritual stuff for myself. Not that I feel I would ever sell, because I'm kind of like a perfectionist. So when I look at my work, I'm like, no one would ever buy this. But I do like making my own stuff. I feel that's very resonant and powerful. Service wise, the thing that I offer, which I don't make money off of, but I don't try to lose money off of, excuse me, is my paranormal research and investigation. So I do a lot of that myself. I do a lot of that with my group, but there's times where I open it up to the field. And right now I do have some locations that are open, with a couple slots open, where I will allow someone to come. And all I do is take the price that it takes to rent the place, and I divide it out by how many people are going. I don't make anything off it. I don't care about making the money, but what I do care about doing is taking people out for life-changing experiences. And one thing people say to me is, you're so involved in the paranormal, but how come I don't see you releasing a lot of evidence? I don't care about capturing evidence, because those that are so concerned about capturing evidence are only doing so to impress you, to get a name for it, to get buzz. I don't care about any of that. I truly am there to connect to the spirits. So what I like to do is take a very different approach. I take people out. Let's turn off the cameras. Let's turn off all the high-tech gadgets. And let's show you a way to connect to spirit very truthfully, with reverence and respect. And more often than not, something happens that night that completely changes their life forever. And no, it's not on footage. No, it's not something you can post on Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook. It's just a memory that you will carry with you to the moment you leave this world. And that is what I find powerful. And I like to take people out and do that. And I've had people fly in from Texas, from Iowa, from California, from all over the country to just come on these night excursions with me to famous locations of insane asylums and prisons and things, and just contact spirit in a very raw form and manner, and then to go back about their life, and so do I. And that's what I offer. So not a lot of goods, but for those listening out there, that is one of the services I do offer, is to show you a different way of looking at spirituality and spirits, under the assumption that maybe nothing will happen that night. But more often than not, like I said, something, if you're sincere, usually does, and it's usually pretty profound.
So what's the best way to contact you for something like that? Is it through your Facebook page?
Yeah, you can reach me at Facebook under Frater Crow is my personal Facebook. I have Celestial Oddities Radio, Nights of the Nephilim Radio, celestialoddities@gmail.com for emails. My Instagram is Darkness and Divination. And yeah, I think that's most of my sites. I don't know. I can't even keep track of them anymore. But any one of those, if you reach out to me, chances are I'll see it the same day or following day. I'm pretty quick on responding back to everybody. So whether it's, wanting to come on one of these excursions with me, whether it's questions or concerns or anything out there, folks, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always very kind and easy to approach. More than happy to talk to all of you. Don't be a prick. If you are, I'll be one back. And other than that, we'll get along.
Excellent. So do you have anything coming up that you would like to let our viewers know about?
Currently, right now, just a lot of different research outings. Like I said, that we were just talking about doing that coming up. I am teeter-tottering on the idea of writing a book, on paranormal research, along the fields of ethereal dynamics, which is the dynamic of spirit, and figuring out how all this works, like we talked a little bit about tonight. I have some pretty revolutionary ideas that I've synthesized through my research that I've never heard anybody else talk about, on how I think spirits of the dead work, and how a lot of conjuration and ritual works that is very, very strange. But I have a lot of backing behind it that I think will really change the game if and when I release it. But my thing is, I don't want to release it too soon. I want to make sure it's been fully analyzed, and this type of research never ends. So it's kind of a catch-22. That I keep wanting to do more research to synthesize it more, but then I just need to do more research again. And so eventually I might release that. So keep an eye out for if and when that happens. More radio shows. Celestial Oddities Paranormal Guys launches July 6th with season 4. Great guests, great call-in episodes, great topics. It'll also be video now for the first time this season, just like Nights of the Nephilim now is. And jump into the Nights of the Nephilim season if you haven't, folks. Our next episode is 1 week from today, so next Thursday, which would be the 29th, and I got the world-famous Lon Milo Duquette coming on, and I'm very excited to bring him on. Been, doing magic for 60-plus years, and quite an interesting fellow. So, those are the things I got coming up.
Wonderful. And I'll be sure to put the links down in the description so folks can check that out. The last question of the evening that I ask everyone: what advice do you have for the person that's out there searching right now? They're looking around, they're shopping for belief, so to speak. What advice do you have for them?
I would say be true to yourself. It sounds cliche, but it's the truth. Be true to yourself. Don't feel like you need to follow any other man or woman's path, because your path should be your own, especially if you're a left-hand path practitioner. Being a left-hand path practitioner doesn't mean that you follow Frater Crow in everything I do, or Alistair Nocht in everything he does. What that means is you take what resonates and you discard the rest, and you use those pieces to build your practice and what makes sense for you. And that's what I would say for someone starting out there is discover what works for you, what doesn't, and synthesize that into a very powerful practice. And don't be afraid to be original. And don't let yourself be pulled in a million different directions like we spoke about earlier. And to end that point, I would say do your research, because unfortunately, there is a lot of work coming out these days. There is a lot of books. There is so many people who have only been in this lifestyle for 1 year, and then they're out there claiming to be, the epistemists and be the greatest magician of all time, and releasing books, and they've only just scratched the surface of their own beginning understanding of this world. But yet they're teaching other people. And when it's the blind leading the blind, it's very, very scary. There's a lot of things out there, folks, that a lot of people just don't realize. One, and I'll finish it with this. One thing that I think would be a shock to a lot of people, and it'll be hard to digest, and it might piss a lot of people off. Let's use Lucifer, for example. There's always been that argument. Is Lucifer Satan? Satan Lucifer? Lucifer's the emperor of evil. Lucifer is the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and so forth. The problem with all of that is Lucifer never actually existed as a character, even in the Bible. There has been a mistranslation for 2,000 years, 3,000 years. The original passages that Lucifer was ever mentioned was in the Vulgate, which is the epitome of the Roman Catholic Church. That's their Bible. It's in Latin. But Latin wasn't the original language the Bible was written in. The original Old Testament was Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. In those passages, oh, how you have fallen, great morning star, son of the dawn. It used Eorophos, which was just light, or morning star. And when it was translated into the Vulgate, into Latin, the word that they used to express light in morning star was Luciferos, or Lucifer. And somehow that got misconstrued to be a fallen angel of pride that came down and became the devil himself. But that's not the case. Even when it talked in the old passages, those passages only ever referred to it as a title, not a person. Eorophos, was a title, was not a being. That's why every time you see it in all those old passages, it never was capitalized. Satan is capitalized. Elijah is capitalized. Adam's capitalized. Lucifer was always lowercase because it was not a person or being. It was a title. And right after they mentioned that famous passage in the Bible, folks, and that they talk about Lucifer, the fallen morning star, one of the things you should pay attention to is, let me see if I still have it here, Elijah 14:4, that thou shalt take up this parable against the king of Babylon, was one of the following sentences afterwards. They literally tell you one of the following sentences that what they are talking about with Lucifer is the king of Babylon. This parable against the king of Babylon. It was never about an angel. It was never about Satan. So this all comes from my good friend and amazing occultist, P.O.N.G, in a series that you can watch on YouTube called The Lucifer Conundrum. It's a two-parter. He goes in, he speaks like 9 different languages. He goes back and translates all the old passages and shows how you have to do your due diligence, is why I'm bringing this up. Because for 2,000 years, millions of people on both left and right have falsely worshipped or revered or feared a character that never actually existed. There starts to question reality, because obviously there's people that have conjured this being and had experiences with them. Well, what exactly did they conjure? Because the original essence of what we believed was Lucifer never existed. He was not a fallen angel. That actually came about by John Milton's Paradise Lost and by Dante Alighieri with the levels of hell. That's where they translated those same passages into who people believe in a modern culture Lucifer is. He's the devil. He's the emperor. He never existed, folks. But I think there's an egregore that we created by all revering and putting energy into him. We created a spirit that now will show up when you summon Lucifer. So like I said, long-winded, this is a way of saying that even things we've held on to for thousands of years can very much be wrong translations and false. So you have to not only find what path works for you, you not only have to be true to yourself, but you also have to do your due diligence to dig deeper and deeper. Don't ever just stop at the base level. Keep digging and digging until you hit rock bottom, and then dig some more, and you will find amazing things out there. And like I said, everything I presented there, I take no credit. I already knew that Lucifer wasn't who people believed he was, and he was just a title of the king of Babylon. But P.O.N.G blew it off the charts with what he released. Check out the Lucifer Conundrum on YouTube. You'll love it. Like I said, if it pisses you off out there, sorry folks, but it's the truth. And sometimes the truth hurts. So I would just say be yourself, guys, and you'll discover a wonderful, beautiful path that'll absolutely unfold your life.
That's great advice. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for being here tonight. I really, really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. I'm sure that our listeners have learned a lot as well.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you having me on, brother. It was an honor to be on your show. And like I said, I'm glad we got to turn the tables around a little bit and get to interact with one another again. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Until next time, this has been Alistair Young. Ave Satanas.